Sweet. All right, so give me an example through Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic Greeks that they used diplomacy to sort of expand their empires. How did they use diplomacy? Yes, Sean.
The Indian Empire, after the Persian War, they kind of incorporated everyone into a big empire.
Yes.
And they made themselves the head of it.
Good. Now, was this diplomacy were they kind of going into places being like, hey, let's just be buds and let's like work together? Or most of the time, the diplomacy was a result of what, Luke?
They would say, we're going to burn your city to the ground if you don't.
Yeah, there was a threat of force behind it. Absolutely. Okay? So diplomacy is one way in which these giant empires sort of exercise their military power. How about developing infrastructure or supply lines? How do we discuss that? What's the most sort of basic one? GB. Roads, exactly, right? So the more you sort of go out and conquer, and if you have a civilization, say in Athens or Sparta, and then you go out and conquer someplace in Persia, in order to sort of unify those two, you need to do what? Connect them with roads. So infrastructure is one way in which these large empires sort of exercise their military power, okay? Also, we have fortifications. And what do I mean by fortifications, guys? What do I mean by fortifications? GB?
Improvements on, the city?
Not necessarily. Fortifications, Luke?
Making your defense better?
Yeah, your defense better. And what's sort of in these ancient empires we've been studying, what's probably the best example of that? Anybody know? I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a hint here. That's it. Anybody know what that is? Anthony?
The Great Wall of China.
That is. So, this is a sweet selfie of me in the Great Wall of China. Check out my hair, isn't it awesome? So back in December of 2010, I was actually invited by the Chinese government to go be a guest of the state, and I was a scholar that judged an international English-speaking speech competition. So I got to go to the Great Wall, and so what you see here is obviously, why was the Great Wall built, guys? Luke?
To defend from the Mongols.
Yeah, to keep people out, but also what? To what?
Oh, to link the empire.
Well, yeah, to unify it, but also what? You're missing, it was also to keep people out, but it was also what? Anthony?
Would you like to keep people in?
Absolutely to keep people in. So look, all over the wall, who's been there besides me? Haha. Okay. So all over the wall, you'll see these awesome little carved etchings, which look really great with this sort of I don't know which Instagram filter this is, but it really brings out the sketching, I believe. So that was my favorite one right there. All over the place, like old Chinese women wanted to get pictures with white dudes, such as myself. And there you go. So yes, obviously, fortifications most famously exhibited by the Great Wall of China were one way in which these major empires tried to sort of build and keep up their imperial states, okay? So using fortifications. I'm also going to talk about briefly something Ryan telegraphed here, and that's drawing military from local populations or conquered peoples. Ryan was exactly on the money when he said one of Alexander the Great's really sort of intuitive and genius moves was when he'd go, say, conquer someplace in Persia, call it Alexandria. Do you think he'd take one of his buddies from Greece and then stick them in there and saying, hey, you're ruling this? Or what would he do that actually made his empire stronger? Justige? Yes, yes. And he'd basically say, I'm going to make you a deal. You can kind of be lord and dominion over this place, but who do you answer to? Me. And he also, as he sort of would go and conquer these places, he would take people from the local population and sort of subsume them into his army as he went on conquering more places, right? So that's one way also that they tried to expand their military power, their military might, was by drawing people from conquered populations and local people, right? Genius move, because it made not only his empire more diverse, but still unified, but also instantly brought a sense of sort of buy-in among some local people. Now, it's not like, I go to GB and be like, hey, you're the new guy here, and everybody's like, hey, yay, GB's in charge. No, obviously there's factions among these places that were conquered, but it would at least get buy-in from a significant portion of the population. And last, we want to talk about economics. So, how did these great empires, and we'll keep using our example of Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic Greeks, right? How did they use sort of trade or economic integration to sort of expand their military might across vast areas? Nick?
Like the coins, they were different currency like that was in other places throughout the empire.
So what would they do with currency specifically, though?
They would spend it.
Well, they spend it, but remember, the video talked about this. They found coins in Afghanistan that had Alexander the Great's likeness. Therefore, we can assume that the Hellenistic Greeks did what, GB?
Traded a lot.
Traded a lot, or even, Justige? Anybody? Brandon? Had a common currency. They established a common currency. So as soon as they went into a place, took it over, they'll be like, hey, you guys use this to buy stuff now, right? Once again, a mechanism of this sort of soft power in order to integrate this large militaristic empire, okay? And we already talked about this briefly, but how would using things like roads sort of bond, especially in terms of trade? Especially in terms of trade. Not just in terms of connecting the two people, but now that they're connected, how would roads help trade? Nick?
You guys are like specifically connected by one road, so it'd be easier to trade with parts of the empire.
Absolutely, and so if we assume Alexander the Great conquered these places in Persia, obviously the Persians had some goods that the Greeks didn't have, but is it more beneficial to trade with somebody inside your empire or outside of your empire? Really? What if your empire... This is sort of the old version of civilization you guys are thinking of, right? Remember that old idea of trading civilizations where, the Indus River Valley traded with Mesopotamia because they both had goods that each other didn't have. But now, all of a sudden, we're talking about these large empires that are subsuming all these other civilizations within them. So, let me re-ask the question. Is it better to trade inside or outside your empire? Luke. Inside, why?
Because you can make taxes and charge people.
Absolutely, you have more control and you stand to gain more monetarily via taxation. So I want to make sure we understand why we got that question wrong there. So remember, we're moving from this idea of civilizations based on these rivers, like the Indus River Valley, and then the Mesopotamians, and then, Athens and Sparta. And now we're talking about all these places like the Persian Empire, the Hellenistic Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, that were about going out, conquering, and putting all of these civilizations on sort of one large umbrella. Does that make sense? So now all of a sudden within, for example, the Hellenistic Empire, you had a variety of goods that used to come from Persia, that used to come from the Indus River Valley, that used to come from Mesopotamia. But now all of those goods would be subsumed underneath the Hellenistic Empire. Does that make sense? And obviously, it makes more sense to trade within something you have control over, and Luke was exactly right, something you can make money off through taxation, than something that you would have to go and try to negotiate and maybe conquer. All right, so hopefully you know, when we're asking how did these people use different tactics to kind of expand and solidify their military might, we look at trade and economic integration. We look at drawing military from local populations or conquered peoples. We look at building fortification and defenses. We look at developing infrastructure. And we look at diplomacy. Okay? Cool. All right, we're going to switch gears here.